Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Get Into It with Gila. Today I have Rochelle Garfield. Hi, Rochelle.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. So I'll just say I wanted to have you on because I read your book. It's called Out of the Shadow. If you could just introduce yourself a little bit, tell the audience where do you live, what do you do?
Okay. I live in Houston, Texas. I moved here 10 years ago and I had lived in Atlanta before that for 8 years.
Mhm.
Um, I work as a speech therapist, but I love doing lots of things. I do some photography on the side, and I do parenting workshops, and I don't know, and
And you're an
writing.
author, a published author, right? That's so cool. Okay, so I read your book called Out of the Shadow, and it's a book about um, I guess really a lot about eating disorders, right? The main character is an eating disorder specialist, and she also suffered from an eating disorder. So, could you talk to us a little bit about where you got the inspiration to write the book, and also, as we were talking about a little bit before via email, like the whole publishing, like did you get,
Okay.
or were you scared and secure? Talk to us
So
about.
those both are long stories, but I'll just
Yes,
start and
yeah,
you
go for
tell
it.
me
I
what
can't
you want to
wait.
hear more about.
Yeah, okay,
Okay,
go for it.
so my aunt died of anorexia when I was 2. It
Oh
was my
wow,
mother's sister,
I'm so
and
sorry.
it had it was something that I thought about a lot growing up. My mother talked about it a lot. My grandmother talked about it. She actually used to speak in schools to, like, she wanted to prevent anybody from falling into that trap, or anything she could do to raise awareness. So, and it was such a painful thing to hear about it. And, like, my mother would talk about how special her sister was, and, like, it felt like it wasn't like a good closure to her life, to my mother, because, like, it felt like, couldn't someone help her? Like, why, like, why couldn't she,
Mhm.
overcome it? It was something in her head. It was so mind-boggling to think about, and hard. Um, so I always would read about it, and it was kind of, growing up, I was scared of an eating disorder, but I always felt like it was in my genes. Like, I never wanted to get anorexia or to be anorexic. I heard how terrible my aunt's the end of her life was, and so it was always there. And the same, but at the same time, I probably had a genetic predisposition for it. Like, I felt like I could always fall into that trap. Um, and then so then I got married. I had one son, and I was like, I'm going to do everything to help prevent my kids from ever, having eating disorders. And he was, like, super not picky. I was so proud of myself. He would eat anything. And I thought, I'm doing it. I'm doing what I wanted to do. I'm an extremely picky eater, and I'm going to talk about that more. But from the time I was little, like, to this day, there are still hundreds of foods I probably haven't tasted. So I
Mhm.
never, like, really had normal eating habits. And I thought I could change maybe if I do it a better way, I'll break that cycle for my kids.
Mhm.
But then I had my second son, and I did everything the same, and he was extremely picky. And so I
Mhm.
started getting very anxious about, how his eating was developing. And so I decided I really want to get help for how I eat. It wasn't a body, like, it wasn't really about weight, or my, like, a body, distorted body image, but I had, like, these very, like, I only would eat very specific things. Textures bothered me. I had so many criteria about what I would eat.
And you're a speech
Um,
therapist also. Was that,
right.
did you had a lot of, like, do you work with kids? Do you have like picky eaters? Do you work with picky eaters?
So my focus is more on language,
Mhm.
and so I don't really, work on that. But I did read a lot about that. Anyway, I decided to go get help, and and I was diagnosed with OCD and eating, and they told me that it wasn't really anorexia, but it could very easily become that at any point, because if it, like, attached to a body image distortion, or it would be so easy to become, anorexia. And I think that I was, like, always kind of fighting it in the back of my head. So I went to one person for a while who tried to help me. It was great therapy, but it didn't change any of my eating. So then he referred me to this top eating disorder clinic. And when I went there, it was like a disaster. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of helping me, all of a sudden everything got so much worse. He like everything that he was doing to like try to increase the amount of foods I would eat or what I was, okay with eating made me like not want to eat. Like, and I realized all these things I had read about eating disorders relating to feeling in control. And I realized how like it made me feel like so like almost babyish, but like out of control, where he would say, you have to try one new food by next week. And then I would come back and I didn't do it. And then he
Mm-hmm.
started telling me I had oppositional defiance disorder. It was not a good experience, but through that, I'd always wanted to write something that had a part of the story that was about eating disorders, just to increase awareness and let people know, what people go through. And then that experience also made me want to just talk about treatment for eating disorders and things that could be unhelpful. It's just kind of triggered this whole uh, story in my head.
So was this the first book that you wrote?
I've written a lot of short stories before, um, and published, some of them. But this was the first novel.
It's so funny because I told you in the email, but I don't really like to read novels. I really prefer to read like memoirs, and I'm pretty sure I'm in a WhatsApp chat with your sister.
Oh
Does that
yeah,
make sense? Yeah.
yeah,
So
Cyril.
so she posted about your book, and I work with eating disorders, so I was so excited to see like a book about eating disorders in the from world. And the whole time, it says on the title, only on the cover, a novel, but I kept reading it as a memoir. I don't know why. And then
I mean,
at the
I
end,
really, I felt like when I was writing it for a year, I like felt like I was the characters. Like I was totally living in their world, like thinking like them. Like I felt like I was writing a memoir. So
wow, wow. But the story wasn't exactly your story, was it?
right. No, I took
Anything,
pieces and then just mixed
right?
different things together.
I don't know if you have read any of Jodi Picoult's books. She's like such a famous
Some of them.
author.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I read one of her books and I became like obsessed with her. So I followed her for like a while. I watched every single YouTube video about her. And she said that like she feels like in a way she has like schizophrenia with her characters. Like she just would sit and the characters would just start talking to her. Is that how you felt when you were writing?
Yeah, or just like I was in their life. Like it was weird when I finished the book. Like
Right.
I felt so like empty. Like what happened to that whole
It
part
was
of my
so
life that
good.
was going on?
It was so good. So another thing that came up for me when I was reading it, it was that like, were you scared to publish it? Like, were you scared to first of all get like like you said, some people might read it as a memoir, so maybe they would have like some insights into your life, but also like the whole, it's scary to self-publish or try to get published. It's expensive and it's time consuming and everything.
It is very scary. Okay, so I had like years ago, I had written a collection of short stories and I sent it to a very big publishing company, a from publishing company. And a very nice woman was at that, I don't know how, I'm sure things are different now. I think this was in the year 2000. But the process was she would first read the book. And if she was okay with it, she would give it to a board that would vote on it. And then if they voted on it, it would go to one final rabbinic authority who would make the final decision. So I sent her the collection of short stories, and she was so positive, and she like you know told me that they're probably going to want to publish it. And then she sent it to the board. She kept updating me, and they voted to publish it. And so it basically, I thought like she had made it sound like it was going to be published, and I was very excited. And
Hmm.
then it went to this rabbinic authority, and he said that there were topics in it that he didn't think were okay for their publishing company to publish.
Mm.
So this was, I think, even pre-Mishpacha, like before
Hmm.
Mishpacha magazine and all. So probably, now there are so many more topics that people write about and talk
Right,
about.
right.
But, that was very, um, like, I don't know, I had been so excited and I was so hopeful that they were going to publish it. I wish I knew her name because she was so nice. She sent me back the manuscript. At that point also, I sent her like paper, not in an email.
Mhm.
And with it, she wrote a really nice note, telling me to keep writing and like really encouraging me to write, like saying how much she enjoyed the stories. So that made me want to keep publishing, but I thought I'm not going to do a from publishing company again. I don't want to have
Mhm.
to, be like think about everything I'm talking about or feel like limited about what I can write.
Mhm.
So that's when I started. Then I got this idea in my head that I'm going to write this novel. It took a long time until I actually wrote it, but um,
So talk to me about that. Like was it like one day you were like, I have this story. You just have to sit and write it? Like, how did that go? Because I want to write, I'm working on a book sort of, and I want to know how that worked for you.
I spent a lot of time like thinking about it in my head before I was actually writing it. Like just like playing around with the story and thinking about the characters, and it did make it much easier once I was actually writing it. And I don't know. I'm sure you're really busy and there's not a lot of time in the day, but like you could always think a little bit. So it's
Yeah.
easier to work on it like that.
Yeah. I feel like it's funny because I like sat down once, I like opened up a Google Drive and I was like, how do you remember what you're up to? Like you write and then you come back and then you have to reread because I'm not, I have a very bad memory. So like I could think about something, but if I don't write it down, I won't remember it. It's like scary. So it's different. Some people are not like that. If they think about, if they have that train of thought, then it's like in the book, even if they didn't write it. So
Yeah, I guess if you could
is
just
that what
like
you
put
have?
give yourself voice notes or jot down little
Yeah.
things to.
Was this book hard to publish?
Okay, so then that's the next part. So I thought, okay, if I'm not doing something from, it's going to be much easier. But
Right.
it's actually a lot harder than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you know how it works, but you have to you can't go directly to a publishing company. You need an agent,
Right.
and to get an agent, you have to write this query letter to try to convince them to take on your book. But first, you have to convince them even just to read your book.
Right.
So I sent out 100 emails to different agents. It's not so hard. It's just an email,
Right.
but no one would even read the book. So I thought, okay, it must be the letter. So I hired someone to help me write a better letter. And I
Wow.
sent out another 100, and still not one agent would even read the book.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I would be
So,
so discouraged. You have a lot of confidence.
well, I started asking around, and people told me that there are so many people writing books that
Right.
people only want to publish something that they know is going to make money. They have so many choices.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in order to get an agent to want to publish your book, you have to already either have a following, like have some, an
Mm-hmm.
Instagram account with a lot of followers or some kind
Mm-hmm.
of blog, or you have to show that you've been published in like big magazines. So I was writing on my query letter, I was published in Mishpachar. I mean, they don't, that didn't mean anything to anyone.
Right.
So then I kind of was like, this is never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But this
Meanwhile,
was
there was
already
this,
after you wrote the whole book.
right, the book was finished.
Wow.
And I felt like self-publishing was kind of giving up. Like I had this dream of publishing a book. So it
Mm-hmm.
felt like, but so while this was happening, somebody stayed at my parents' house for a Shabbos, and he mentioned to my mother that he was just beginning a publishing company.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother, as a nice Jewish mother, was so excited. She said, "Oh, you have to talk to my daughter. She writes." So he was really nice, and he spent a lot of time talking to me, and he told me that he couldn't publish it because he was trying to start like a Haredi publishing company in Israel. So
Mm-hmm.
this really wouldn't fit the books that he published, but
Right.
he was very curious what it was like to get a book published in, just the regular world. And so he wanted to know about it. He stayed in touch and would keep asking me like, what happened? Did anything change? And then like a year before I published this book, so that's like 2 years ago, all of a sudden he reached out to me and told me that his publishing company didn't work. He didn't make money. So he's switching what he's doing, and his whole company is gonna be helping people self-publish.
Oh.
And he would love to help me publish the book. So I didn't really, it felt like, I don't know, like I'm giving up on my dream, even though nothing was happening in terms of publishing it.
Right.
And then it wasn't so expensive. I'm not sure if it was because he was just starting, but one of my kids like heard me, and he was very adamant that he wanted me to publish it. And he's like, I'm giving you the money. And I didn't really, need him to do that, but that really like it like made me realize that, it was worth pursuing.
Hmm.
So I did that and I was so happy, man. Because a lot of people told me like really bad stories where like inexperienced writers who publish things with a small
Hmm.
publishing company and then you lose the rights to your book.
Right.
So you could have to change things, or if they don't want to print any more copies,
Hmm.
you have no control over it and you can't print them because you don't own the book anymore. So I
Wow.
was very
I've heard that.
grateful.
I've
Yeah.
heard that.
And
Yeah.
he was extremely nice. His name is Eliyahu Miller. He has, a company online. And he helped me with everything. It wasn't just like there were so many things I wouldn't have understood or knew about. He really was extremely kind and helpful. And in the end, I was so happy with how I did it and how it worked out, and that I had total control over how everything about it that you lose when someone else's publisher owns the rights.
How has the feedback been since the book's been published? Like, do people get in touch with you, or do they want you to come speak
And
about it?
yeah, I spoke at a few different book clubs and for a few different shows.
It's
So
awesome. It's really, really, really good. It's really well written. Like I said before, like I don't read a lot of Jewish books, and I don't read a lot of novels because I read a lot of non-Jewish books. So then to read like a Jewish book, it's like the writing just isn't as good. So when I read your book, I was like I couldn't put it down. I think I read it in one Shabbos. It was so good, and it was really, really, really informative.
yes.
Um, what is like your goal of the book? Like I was emailing you before about like what do you want people to know about eating disorders and the treatment? And now I'm not sure if you ever heard of intuitive eating or health at every
Yeah.
size. Yeah, but
No,
like,
and I know that the intuitive eating, any website that talks about eating disorders talk about how significant and important intuitive eating could be in preventing or combating eating disorders. So
mhm,
your work is so valuable to helping people.
yeah, it's really important, and there is definitely a huge shift in the non-Jewish world, in the Jewish world, like that people are really becoming more aware of, the problem with diet culture and how dangerous it is. So, but yeah, what did you want people to like know? Like, what's the one major thing you want people to know about eating disorders?
I mean, being aware of it, and the more deep into an eating disorder someone gets, the harder it is to treat. And so being aware of signs, or, when someone sees someone struggling, and being, especially a family member, of being supportive of them getting help, I think is so important. And then supporting people like you and people who are really working to change people's perceptions of diet and the whole diet culture. And um, besides for intuitive eating, you said another, the body.
I think I was saying like the treatment that you've like seen is the most effective, or like because something that you was really interesting in your story was that the treatment for you was actually not good. Like it made it worse. So that's
And
important
so,
for people to know.
yeah, so this wasn't based on, what I wrote. This part was all anecdotal, but so many people have told me about treatment that didn't help them. And I know that, eating disorders is one of the hardest psychiatric disorders to treat
Hmm.
and to really, you know, be cured from. Um, and I just totally lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Oh, so I'm saying that it's anecdotal because people could have the best treatment and still struggle. But different times, the experience that I had didn't seem like it was unique. Like people would talk about experiences they had, that they were in a treatment facility that was very controlling, and and sometimes it saves people's lives and it's necessary.
Hmm.
But then they as soon as they left, they would go back
They
to their old.
relapse, right?
Right. And
Right.
so I don't know. I in my head, I also hope maybe someone would read it, and it would give them an idea, some real psychologist or somebody, to do some real research and rethinking ways to treat eating disorders. I know there are lots of new approaches, but still most of the big treatment centers are very um, behavioral. Like
Right.
you get rewards for eating, then you lose privileges for not eating.
Right. I know, it's really sad, and it's really hard. It's a really hard thing to treat just because of the so many things at play, mentally, physically,
Right,
and the brain that is
right,
calorically
starved.
starved. Yeah, it's just really hard. It's a really, really hard disorder to treat. Um, so how did your story end with the eating disorder? Did you feel like you were cured?
So no,
You
I
still
left the
struggle?
I left the treatment place that I'd been because like I said, it was really having the opposite effect, and I felt like it was turning into like a game where it was making me not want to eat. Where
Right,
I hadn't had that problem before. I
right.
just was so particular about what I would eat, but I didn't care. I never minded eating a lot, or I wouldn't even think about that.
Hmm.
And so I left, and then I started like getting better on my own again,
Hmm.
back to what the way I had been. And I felt safer like that, but it's not, I still,
It's still frustrating for you that you can't eat certain foods.
I don't know if it's frustrating because it's just how I've always lived, but I
Hmm.
didn't want to model that to my kids or, I don't know, perpetuate it. But I guess that bad experience made me scared to try again. Maybe one day in the
Yeah,
future, I'll try again, but it was like a scary experience. It wasn't a
that does
good
not sound
experience.
like a good experience. Totally. Have you heard of ARFID?
No,
ARFID is also a diagnosed eating disorder, which is like an aversion to certain foods.
yeah, that
So
sounds,
yeah, so that's interesting.
and it's
Something to
so
think about.
easy for me to not like a food, like anything could
Hmm.
make me feel a strong aversion. So maybe
Right.
that's
Yeah, it's ARFID, ARFID. And what about your kids? Like, it's so funny that you said that. I mean, it's not funny, but your oldest son, you did the same
yeah,
thing, and then your younger son, you did the same thing and had a totally different effect. I think it's important for parents to hear that a lot of it is nature, you know,
right,
and
right. And I realized that, I
yeah,
had been so proud that it was my parenting style.
right.
And then I
Well, you
saw
can
that they
still be
had,
proud. You can still be proud.
so that son, I know I just, I mean, I don't like being a controlling parent anyway. And he did outgrow most of it. And I think that
Mhm.
for picky eaters, I think typically kids outgrow it, but
Yeah.
they added it to the DSM-5, right?
What, picky eaters?
Yeah, because they said some kids don't outgrow it. And so they realized that it could turn into a disorder,
I wonder
although,
if that's ARFID. I'm not sure off the top of my head
mm,
if picky eaters was added. I will say that a lot of moms get very nervous and then they push the food more and it makes it worse. A lot of kids, like I have three kids and my oldest is 8. And I've said this many times on the podcast, but I was like, I'm a dietitian. I'm going to teach her everything. And like, she literally didn't eat. Like, I would force her to eat. She didn't eat. But then, like, when I learned about intuitive eating and division of responsibility and like, not controlling the food, like, she's my best eater. And then my 5-year-old son, like, he doesn't really eat. Like, he'll like come and eat like 2 bites, but like, I'm not nervous. And I see that like he's much more open to trying, and like, it's so ironic and it's so hard for parents because they're like, he must eat, she must eat.
right,
But then if we could just like, move back a little bit, they get more curious and they see we're modeling eating.
totally.
Sometimes if we
Right.
can, then they'll see how we're eating.
But I really wanted to give them space, like to develop that intuition with regards to eating,
Right.
that it was, and not have any of that, I don't know. I didn't want aversion to food to develop because I forced them to eat something or
Right. Right. I also wanted to ask you, when did you start like writing? Like, when did you develop that skill or know that you had a skill?
I always loved writing. Um,
Are you a big reader?
so when I was younger, I read a lot. And then I started, like you, I didn't like reading novels so much, more like nonfiction or memoirs. I really enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
but I still like writing fiction. So
Mm-hmm.
um, this is also a good story. In fifth grade, I had a teacher that I loved. And I once wrote something for her, and on she gave me like it was an E plus plus. That was like an A in
Hmm.
that grading system. And she wrote she never gave that grade to anyone, and that she never saw a kid write like this. And I don't know why she decided to do that, but from that moment, like in my head, I thought I'm gonna be a writer. Like she
Wow.
really so, and I felt so good because I thanked her in the introduction to the book, and I got to
Oh,
tell her how meaningful that
wow.
comment was that she probably never realized. She probably thought it was
Wow.
just, I'm sure she didn't even remember.
Wow. That's so nice to hear. Yeah, it's true. You never know, like what you say could like really change a person's life. It's incredible. Did you ever take like any like writing classes, or it's just a
Just
natural
like
talent?
technical writing classes in college, but
Right. Right. Um, I wanted to also ask you, yeah, another thing is that like, did you have a lot of support when you were writing the book? Like, did like, your family or your friends, like because if I sent the email to 100 people and nobody wanted to, publish my book, I'd be like, okay, nobody likes my book, you know?
so my grandmother was a writer also. Like she was always into creativity, and besides for this teacher, my grandmother always was inspiring me to use any creativity I had, writing, drawing. She loved making up songs and singing. I can't sing,
Hmm.
but any like she loved inspiring people to use their creativity. And so, and then she would always be so complimentary. So that always inspired me. My mother is an artist, and Esky Cook. I don't know if you know
No,
that
I
name.
don't, but that's so
Okay.
cool.
So she always like inspired all of us to like use any kind of creative talents that we have. And she would always be so complimentary. So everything I would do, she would always make me feel like it was amazing. And if
That's
with
so
writing,
nice. So nice.
so I really think my mother, my grandmother,
So
really.
when you didn't get the emails, you were just like, I got this. Like, the book is good. It's gonna, like, I gotta get it out
Well,
there.
I guess in a way it was good that no one would even read it, because that made me like feel
Right.
hopeful that maybe if they would just read it, then they
Right.
would like it. Like I
Right.
kept, but maybe I don't know. So
Yeah.
maybe it's funny that you're that I didn't think about that till right now when you're asking me, but I guess it was kind of a blessing that they
Right.
didn't want to read it, because if 100 people read it and said no, we're
Right.
not interested,
Right.
I
Right.
think I would have a harder time believing that it was still worthwhile.
Right. I don't know if do you know Elizabeth Gilbert? I'm sure you know her, who she is. She wrote the book Eat, Pray, Love.
No.
Oh, it's a really, really, really famous book.
Okay.
It's a good read. Not like 100% appropriate, but it's a really, really
Okay.
interesting book. It's about the story of her like getting a divorce. And so she travels the world. So she goes to like India. No, she goes to Italy where she eats, and she goes to India where she prays, and then she goes to somewhere else and falls in love, something like that. And it's like a really famous book. Like she's a best-selling author, but she writes in another book called Big Magic how like a story. I'm not gonna say it well, but a story could be like could just like pop into your head and it could be like magic kind of thing, but like it has to come at the right time. And she tells this story that she like tried to get this book published and like no one even like somebody read it and it's like, nah, I didn't like the ending or whatever. Then by the time she was like already famous, she like resent it and she's like the person was like, this is perfect. I love the ending. And like at first she said like the ending was really bad. And like it was so she's very motivating. Like she has a podcast and she talks to like new writers and she just says like whether or not someone reads your writing, you're an author, and I happen to have a blog, like I love to write. And I used to write when I was in high school, but I think like somebody like discouraged me. Like I also took it hardly, like harshly. And Rebecca Shapiro from Project Proactive, which is how I got into the book club with your sister. She was like, "Oh, I really like your writing," and then I ended up putting some blogs on their website. But just for anyone who's listening, like you don't have to be like a published author. Like you don't have to be like whatever. If you have something in your heart and you want to share it, it's like just share it.
Sometimes that's the most real way to read something, when it's just from
So
your
true.
heart and you're
Right. It's
just
so true.
sharing what you're not trying to write beautiful literary piece, but you're
Right.
sharing your deep thoughts or whatever.
Right. And you write for Mishpacha and Ami?
No, I have. I never wrote as a, I sent in short stories that they printed.
Are you still writing
I mean, I have dreams of more,
more books
right?
that you're thinking about?
Yeah.
Like just thoughts pop up into your head?
Well, I have a lot of kids with dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
So then that's the next book I really want to write about a character with dyslexia.
Wow. Do you ever think about writing a blog or something like that?
How often, what do you do for your blog? Like how often do you
So it's
write?
interesting. I'm like picking your brain about a book versus a blog because like I get like these ideas and I'm like, oh, I gotta write that and I gotta get it out. But really that's not smart because there's like a whole like system, like putting in the right hashtags and how long it should be and the SEO, which is like search engine optimization. But like when I write something, I want to get it out, so badly. So just I want people to come to my website and see what I do also. So the more I write, the more
Right, you get people to see what you get to promote your mission and
yeah.
your work.
Yeah. And then there's like the part of me that's like, no, just put it into the book, but like I'm too impatient. Like I just wanted people to read it.
But it seems like that's a very smart way to do it also, because that's what the agents were saying. You need to build up readers through blogs before you
Right.
even get them.
Right. And
Sounds like you're
everybody's
doing it the right way.
I'm trying, and everybody's publishing a book now. It's true. Like everyone, like all the famous people, like it's just the thing to do now. But this was really, really fun. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with? Any last words?
I mean, I like what you say about everyone writing, and it's so valuable when people share their stories, like to inspire other people, let other people know what people are going through, be more understanding and empathetic to all kinds of people. So that's great. And I think the work you're doing is so valuable and amazing and really important.
Thank you. And where could people find you? Want to leave your email address?
Sure. How do I?
No, just say what it is, and then I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Okay. Rochelle, like Rochelle Garfield at gmail.com.
And your Instagram?
Um, it's
Do you
just
remember?
my name. I think it's
Okay.
just my.
Okay, I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
But this was really, really fun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. Thanks for inviting me.
No
This was
problem.
okay.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.